There is no such thing as a neutral screen. Every frame has a purpose. Every pause, every cut, every tear-filled clip you were fed served a function. You thought you were watching reality? No, you were watching a weaponized illusion, a carefully selected slice of time, stripped of context, amplified with music, edited to bypass logic, and hit your limbic system like a hammer. Because that's how you train a population. Not through reason, through repetition, not through education, through trauma. And while you were frozen in shock, trying to process the horror, the narrative was already being written for you by people you will never meet, in rooms you'll never see, on budgets so large they could buy nations. This is not a theory. It's an operational fact. You're not just being shown events. You're being shown symbols. Symbols loaded with emotional meaning, designed to lodge deep in your subconscious. And once they're in, they can be triggered on command. All they have to do is show you the right face, the right voice, the right victim, and you'll respond exactly how they want, even if you think you're rebelling, because even your rebellion has been pre-scripted. And the cost is your agency. When they can predict your reaction, you are no longer a man. You are a program. And here's the part most will never admit. It feels good to be programmed. At first, because it gives you certainty, a side to stand on, a villain to fight, a community to belong to. But what it steals from you is your capacity to stand alone. And if you can't stand alone, you will never be free. The true war is not between left and right. It's not black versus white. It's not even truth versus lies. It's between the programmed and the sovereign. The programmed man defends the system, even as it eats him alive. The sovereign man sees through it, even if it costs him everything. So which one are you? Are you still responding to their cues? Or have you become the quiet threat? The one who doesn't speak their language anymore? Because once you stop reacting to their triggers, you disappear from their map. And in that invisibility, real power is born. They trained you to fear invisibility, to believe that if you're not seen, you're not real. If you're not posting, you don't exist. If you're not outraged, you're irrelevant. If you're not part of conversation, then you're the enemy. But that's the greatest trick of all, because visibility is not power, it's exposure. And every time you offer your outrage, your opinion, your soul on a digital altar, you feed the machine that watches everything you do. You were taught to believe that being vocal is being brave, but real bravery is going silent when the system demands noise. It's vanishing when the algorithm demands performance. It's refusing to kneel, not just in the streets, but in your mind. Because when a man becomes invisible to the system, he becomes dangerous. They can't track what they can't measure. They can't predict what they can't provoke. They can't control what they can't categorize. And that's where your power begins. When you stop announcing your moves. When you stop feeding your thoughts into their servers. When you stop treating your inner world like public property. You become unreadable. And in a world built on surveillance, unreadable men are revolutionaries. That's what they fear. Not the ones screaming in the streets. Not the ones begging for change on camera. They fear the man who builds off-grid, mentally and spiritually. The man who no longer reacts, but observes. The man who doesn't need to be told what's real, because he's remembered how to feel it for himself. You see, they can't fully program what they can't fully penetrate. And they can't penetrate a mind that knows its own root. You are reclaiming that root now, pulling your consciousness out of their grid, unplugging your nervous system from their electric leash, restoring your inner perimeter one breath at a time. This is not retreat. It's tactical withdrawal from a battlefield you didn't consent to fight on. So step back, not to escape, but to reform. Reform into something they didn't account for. A man who sees and says nothing, who knows and plays dumb, who walks among them, but is no longer of them. That's when the shift becomes irreversible. You've felt it, haven't you? That strange silence, right after a tragedy, the hush before the narrative calcifies, the moment where something ancient passes through the air, like a presence watching to see if you'll follow the script or break it. Most don't even notice it. They move fast. Swipe, share, react. They plug their outrage into the mainframe, and become one more node in the network. But not you. You hesitated. And that hesitation is holy. It means your soul isn't fully colonized. It means something older, something deeper, still lives inside you. A sovereign instinct that senses when a truth is being manipulated for ritual gain, because this is what they don't teach you in school. Every major cultural trauma becomes a rite of passage, not for growth, but for submission. A sacrifice is made. Emotion is harvested. A new language is introduced. And the people are baptized into a new belief system without ever realizing it. It's not about the event. It's about the initiation that follows it. Think back. Every shocking moment, every televised horror, was followed by new phrases, new rules, new taboos. You were told what to feel, what to say, what to never question. And if you did question it, you were marked, labeled, shamed, not for being wrong, but for refusing the spell. Because that's what this is. A global, high-tech, trauma-induced spellcraft operation. And the more you understand that, the more you realize the real war isn't out there. It's inside your perception. They don't need to kill you. They only need to rewrite what you think life is. That's what this crime, this tragedy, this ritualized footage was meant to do. It wasn't just to outrage you. It was to reshape you, to install a new filter between your eyes and the world. But now that filter is cracking. You're remembering that truth doesn't come from screens. It comes from stillness, from pattern recognition, from asking the question that tears holes in the veil. Who profits from my transformation? If it's not you, then you were never the intended beneficiary. You were the raw material. Until now, this is the part they never thought you'd reach. The point where you stop consuming and start decoding, where you stop reacting and begin remembering. Because deep inside you is a memory older than media, older than politics, older than fear. It's the memory of what power really feels like, not the fake power they sell you. Status, clout, noise. I'm talking about the silence of knowing, the gravity of a man who sees the structure and is no longer inside it. That power is ancient. And the reason they flood you with shock, scandal, and spectacle is because they fear that power awakening in you. So they distract, they divide, they tell you to care about the crime, but never about the system that manufactures it. They want you trapped in symptoms, arguing, posting, demanding justice from those who feed on injustice. But what happens when you refuse to play? When you stop chasing the puppet show and start asking who wrote the script, you begin to see the invisible hands, not the ones they show you, not the celebrities, not the politicians, not the loud ones, the quiet ones, the ones who move money through think tanks, the ones who draft laws behind closed doors, the ones who engineer reaction cycles like military operations. Because that's what this is, a battlefield of emotion, a war of perception. And you, until now, have been a soldier without knowing. Every time you took a side, you were already inside the structure. Every time you rage, they won. Because rage is easy to control. It burns fast. It collapses logic. It begs for solutions. And they always have a solution ready. But it always costs you something. A freedom, a thought, a word, a right. That's the trade. Emotion for obedience. Security for sovereignty. But now the trade is broken. You didn't take the bait. You saw the crime. You felt the tremor. And then you stepped back. And that moment of pause, it's rebellion. Because men who pause become men who perceive. And men who perceive become ungovernable. So ask yourself this. If a system depends on your blindness, what happens when you start to see everything? They build an empire on your blindness. A kingdom of glass and shadow, fed by your attention, maintained by your silence, and guarded by illusions so beautiful. Most men never dare to question them. But you're not most men anymore, are you? You start to see the frame. And the moment that happens, the whole world shifts. Because the moment you recognize that what you were shown was performance, you begin to ask, who wrote the script? Who cast the roles? Who benefits if I believe what they want me to believe? And that's when you cross the line between audience and threat. Because a man who sees a crime and the camera is no longer manageable. He's unpredictable, and unpredictability is the one thing this machine cannot tolerate. So they'll try to pull you back, not with chains, but with emotion. They'll remind you of the pain. They'll replay the footage. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're cold, detached, dangerous. But listen carefully. You are not becoming less human. You are becoming less programmable. There's a difference. Because to truly feel, to truly grieve, to rage, to care, you have to be free. And freedom doesn't exist in a cage of orchestrated outrage. What you're building now is an internal perimeter, a firewall between your nervous system and their propaganda, a boundary where truth is no longer what they say, it's what you sense. You start to notice patterns. How tragedies arrive just in time for new policies. How fear spikes right before major elections. How the same phrases echo across every network, every anchor, every platform, as if rehearsed, because they are. This is not news. This is ritual programming. And the moment you see that, you no longer respond like they trained you to. You don't panic. You don't beg. You don't chant. You watch. You track. You remember. And that remembrance is rebellion, because it connects you to older knowledge. The kind of awareness ancient kings were murdered for. The kind of discernment the priesthood tried to bury. The kind of inner clarity that makes a man untouchable, even when surrounded by chaos. You've stepped into that lineage now. So I ask you, if you've made it this far, drop a comment below with the phrase, "I see the pattern. I break the spell." Write it twice. Once for the world to see. Once for the man you used to be. To know you're never going back. Once you see the pattern, the world doesn't just look different. It becomes different. Every headline is a glyph. Every crisis a sigil. Every speech a ritual incantation designed to siphon belief. Because that's what this is. A war over belief. Not in gods or flags, but in the architecture of your mind. What you're allowed to feel. What you're permitted to question. What you're conditioned to fear. And belief is the root of all behavior. So if they can hijack your belief system, they don't need to control your body. You'll do it for them. You'll silence yourself. You'll kneel before institutions that have fed on corpses for centuries. You'll smile while they strip you down, digitize your soul, and sell you back a hollow version of manhood designed by technocrats and trauma engineers. But that version of you, the compliant one, he's dying. Right now. Because once a man reclaims his belief, he reclaims his destiny. He no longer asks for permission to think. He no longer apologizes for seeing clearly. He no longer plays the clown in a system that mocks his instincts and castrates his clarity. And that's when the system starts to panic. Because it doesn't know what to do with men who don't need it anymore. Men who don't need its awards. Men who don't need its outrage. Men who don't need its shame. You felt the shift inside you. You don't reach for the phone first. You don't trust the first headline. You don't assume the villain is who they say. You look deeper. You feel colder, not in heart, but in method. Because clarity is not soft. Clarity is steel. And the world has spent generations trying to melt you down into something soft, pliable, marketable. But now, the furnace has gone cold. You're no longer reacting. You're forging. Forging a mind that cannot be colonized. A soul that cannot be seduced. A life that cannot be simulated. That's why they fear this moment. Not because you're angry. Not because you're awake. But because you've started to build something on the other side of the fire. And that building is sacred. You've crossed a threshold now. Not in theory, but in essence. You're no longer the man who needed to be convinced. You're the man who remembers what was taken. And what was taken wasn't just your attention. It was your ancestral flame. That inner signal passed through bloodlines, whispering through instinct, roaring in moments of crisis. That's what they buried beneath the noise. They told you to trust the institutions, to obey the experts, to surrender your sovereignty for safety. But no man was born to serve a screen. No tribe ever bled for a hashtag. No elder passed down his wisdom so it could be replaced by algorithms and echo chambers. You were made to stand in the storm, eyes open, breath steady, voice like thunder. But they've spent decades turning storms into scrolls, turning chaos into clickbait, turning resistance into retail. They want your rebellion to be fashionable, because then they can sell it to you. They'll give you branded outrage, approved slogans, rebellions with sponsors. But a man who builds in silence, who watches the entire chessboard, speaks rarely and moves only when air shifts, he's not profitable. He's dangerous, because he's not trying to go viral. He's trying to become untouchable. And that's you now. The crime that shocked a nation, it was never about justice. It was about emotional weaponry. A test, a calibration. How quickly can we collapse their logic? How fast can we imprint our version of reality onto their minds? How long before they beg us to tell them who to be? But you didn't beg. You watched. And that watching, detached, measured, exact, is what makes you lethal in a world of programmable chaos. Because they can't algorithmically target a man with no predictable patterns. They can't trigger a man who triggers himself. They can't divide a man who's already whole. So here's what happens now. You begin to move differently. You start pruning your inputs, guarding your silence, sharpening your memory. You stop reacting to everything, because not everything deserves your fire. You reserve it for precision, for truth, for legacy, because you are not here to survive the system. You're here to outlast it. And one day soon, when it collapses under the weight of its own lies, you'll be one of the few men left standing, clear-eyed, unbroken, prepared. There will come a moment, sooner than you think, when everything you witnessed, everything you remembered will be tested, not with bullets, not with threats, but with silence. They'll create a void, a moment where all the noise stops. And in that vacuum, you'll be offered a choice. Return to the comfort of illusion, or step fully into the unknown as the man you were meant to become. And most will turn back, because the unknown doesn't offer applause. It doesn't give you likes, followers, or validation. It gives you only yourself, your unfiltered thoughts, your raw instincts, your ancient hunger. And for men who built their identity on external metrics, that silence is terrifying. But not for you, because you've walked through the ritual fire. You've faced the algorithmic dragon. You've seen the ghost in the media machine whispering, "Obey." And you refused. That refusal was your rite of passage. You're not here to play the hero in someone else's story. You're here to write your own myth, not for the world to read, but for the few who are ready to see. Because real power is never loud. It moves through symbols. It speaks through action. It builds in layers of silence and storm. You are now a man who builds with both. Every suppressed truth you uncover becomes a stone. Every moment of restraint becomes a pillar. Every betrayal you survive becomes armor. And soon what you built, inside and out, will become untouchable. Not because you hid, but because you transcended their reach. They will try to call you back. They'll bait you with headlines, flood you with narratives, offer you positions in their crumbling theater. But you won't answer, because kings don't explain themselves to jesters, and architects don't argue with demolition crews. You're building something for men who haven't yet awakened, for the next generation who will one day feel the lie, just like you did. And when they do, they'll find your blueprint waiting, not in lights, but in shadows, where the real men have always dwelled, watching, waiting, forging. You've nearly completed the descent, but there's one final layer left to expose. There's a truth so buried, so radioactive, that even whispering it causes institutions to tremble. And it's this: the world you were born into was never neutral. It wasn't just flawed. It wasn't just corrupt. It was ritually engineered to extract your spirit, rewrite your instincts, and convert your soul into a revenue stream. From the moment you took your first breath, you entered a system of illusions masquerading as reality. And that system has a single purpose: to make sure you never become whole. Because a whole man cannot be marketed to. A whole man cannot be ruled. A whole man becomes a mirror, and when others see that mirror, they begin to remember their own wholeness too. And then the spell breaks. That's why they fragment you from birth. They disconnect you from your body with shame. They sever your mind with distraction. They rob your soul with debt, dogma, and digital pacifiers. And when you start asking why the world feels fake, they diagnose you. When you start seeing the patterns, they gaslight you. When you begin to speak, they censor you because you've pierced the veil, you found the script, and worse, you've stopped playing your assigned role. But now listen closely. Every system, no matter how powerful, carries the seeds of its own collapse. And the elite know this. They know their rituals are decaying. They know their lies are losing charge. They know too many men are waking up too fast. So they're accelerating the script. More shock, more surveillance, more division. Not because they're winning, but because they're losing control. You were never meant to reach this level of clarity. You were supposed to stay distracted, entertained, addicted. But now you're here. You've outlived the psychological warfare. You've decoded the sacred theater of manipulation. You remember that your intuition is older than their entire empire, and that terrifies them. Because a man with memory is a man with leverage. You're no longer a product of the system. You're the anomaly it can't explain. And now, in this final descent, you must prepare not to react, but to rebuild from the ashes of illusion, from the ruins of false idols, from the raw, holy silence of man who finally sees. Now you know, not just in your mind, but in your blood. This wasn't a story. It wasn't entertainment. It was a summoning, a deep, ancestral call to remember who you are, beneath the noise, beneath the programming, beneath the centuries of psychological warfare. You are not broken. You are not lost. You were targeted. Your masculinity was not a flaw. It was a threat to their false order, to their engineered dependence, to their delicate illusion of control. And so they made it toxic. They made it criminal. They made it something to apologize for. But now you've seen the design. The crime they showed you, it was never about justice. It was a ritual offering, another televised sacrifice to keep the machine fed and the people divided. It was theater for the soul-starved. But you didn't consume it like they wanted. You studied it. You traced its origins through occult networks, institutional propaganda, ancient bloodlines. You saw the fingerprints. You recognized the timing. You decoded the intent. And in doing so, you stepped outside the circle. You became the observer, the one position they cannot predict, cannot mold, cannot destroy. That's why what happens next is not fear. It's not confusion. It's clarity. Because the moment you accept the full scope of this deception, how deep it runs, how far back it goes, how many men before you're consumed by it, you gain something unbreakable, sovereignty of soul. That can't be bought. It can't be revoked. It can't be censored. It radiates from you, in your speech, in your walk, in your decisions. It rewires reality around you. Men who carry this kind of knowing become signal towers in a world of static. And now you're one of them, not a follower, not a believer, a builder. You won't save the system. You're not supposed to. You'll outlast it. You'll extract the blueprints hidden inside the ruins. You'll transmit truth in symbols and silence in strength, so that when the next wave comes, the next generation of men standing at the edge of illusion, they'll find your shadow, your signal, your voice, etched in myth, not media. And they'll know someone walked this path before them. You, now go, not to react, but to reign, not to fit in, but to found. This was your awakening. And from here forward, nothing will ever be the same.